Good evening, everybody. It's Nate G here, along with Dr. Doug Lisle. Dr. Lisle, how are you doing this evening?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's weather's picking up. It's getting to be a little bit more warm. The sun's coming out, and can't wait for the summer.
All right. It's all looking good up here too, except
Fantastic.
for less smoggy up here. But that's just you guys have to deal with it. All right. Good to hear your voice.
All right. Well, today we've got a couple of questions. One on a Cram circuit that Dr. Lisle you've talked about in previous podcasts, and also on a couple of the live Facebook videos. And then we've got a couple of questions on personality, friends, and also about more esteem dynamics. So we'll take away with the plant-based question. Dear Dr. Lisle, despite being 100% whole foods plant-based, I'm still have a very active Cram circuit. It's usually on low-calorie dense foods like fruits or potatoes, beans, etc. So it's not causing me excess weight, but eating into the pain invariably makes me feel bad, induces sleepiness, and other negative side effects. Could you please comment on how various combinations of personality traits might impact one's ability to conquer this Cram circuit, in particular, and step away from the table when I'm satiated? For example, I'm unlucky enough to have relatively high disagreeableness, low emotional stability, low conscientiousness. And I can remember first activating my Cram circuit around 8 years old when my mom cooked Purdue oven stuffer roasters with potatoes. And I would cut it all up into a big mound with lots of chicken fat and go to town. So despite me being 100% whole foods plant-based now, I still struggle with this deeply ingrained pattern.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I believe there's I think I have spotted a bit of a psychometric problem with some people trying to analyze themselves with any online tests about the Big Five, and that is that I think there's a tendency for the high conscientious people to actually underestimate themselves. I think it's a very curious thing. And these kinds of tests have not been through some of the tricky, rigorous psychometric techniques that we need to do some other psychological testing over the years. So I have a feeling that sometimes there may be a subgroup here that is not responding to the questions the way we might want them to. So the person that asked this question and is talking about this kind of history strikes me as that they're probably quite high in conscientiousness. Now, except that they feel low in conscientiousness because they're not doing everything just perfectly. You see how that could be. Now, so I'm not so sure about personality issues with respect to the Cram circuits, particularly, other than obviously possibly more impulsiveness or less stability. That could certainly be involved. I think it's also probably high openness people are generally probably more impulsive. But the Cram circuit is just to fill people in that have never heard me talk about this, that it's my name for what I believe is a tendency in human nature to eat past normal satiety levels when there are high calorie dense foods available. This would make sense to me from an evolutionary point of view. It's certainly going to be behavior you're going to see in animal behavior when you put rich food in an animal cage. And so it would have been an evolutionary sound strategy that humans, when they came across high calorie dense foods, particularly in times when they would have had them in abundance, that they would cram them in. In other words, they would eat past normal satiety levels. Now, an herbivore with a single kind of food, like a koala bear eating eucalyptus leaves, would never have this characteristic because they would never have a food stuff that would be, 300, 400, 500% more calorically rich than their normal chow, and so they wouldn't have this as a tendency to do this because they would never eat anything other than their normal chow, and it's going to be within very narrow parameters in terms of calorie density. But human beings are hunter-gathering omnivores, And so as a result, occasionally they would get very rich foods, in fact, fairly periodically. So meat would have been a rich food that human beings would gladly look forward to at 800 calories a pound. Not necessary for optimum human functioning. However, it would have been necessary many times in order to survive, just to get enough calories. And so as a result, meat also would not have come in regular amounts, i.e. dollars per hour, in the way that digging potatoes and foraging for berries would be fairly predictable. Meat would come in enormous success and great famine. It would have been a highly variable food source, and also highly perishable. So when a major killing was made, the right thing to do would be to cram up to the gills, which is exactly what the big predators do, because they don't know when they're going to make another kill again. So that being the case, the problem is that this wouldn't have been a problem at all for early humans. But in the modern environment, that same tendency can be essentially conditioned to where the point is that where it would have happened only, once or twice a month, now it can be happening every day. And if something happens every day or nearly every day, what happens is that your nervous system essentially anticipates it and therefore gets ready to deal with it. And in this case, it would mean that even after you were full, it would expect you to continue to eat and therefore essentially drive digestive enzymes and neurochemistry that is preparing for the onslaught of the cram. So you can condition a cram circuit to the point where even after you're full, you will be getting feelings like you should still be continuing to eat. And that's what I call the conditioned cram. Now, this person's telling us that they are cramming on foods that are not calorically rich, which is rare, but it is something that is occasionally seen, I would say, in general, out of very high conscientious people. Okay, those are going to be the people that are going to be doing this. Now, so there's nothing unusual about this other than the food choices that the person's making, which I believe are probably excellent ones. But that he's eating into the pain. In other words, he's actually having this happen. The way out of this is to understand that you have a counter conditioning process that you must go through, and so you have to understand this is the equivalent of being addicted to cigarettes, not in terms of health consequences, but in terms of the schema that this thing is that it's following. So if you're a cigarette smoker, you're kind of on a timing clock where you're going to smoke, say, once an hour. And so your nervous system is anticipating that. It's building up neurochemistry in order to diffuse the impact of the nicotine. And if you don't get that nicotine, then the defense against the nicotine sits in your nervous system and actually causes you an uncomfortable feeling that we call craving. And then when you smoke the cigarette, the nicotine and the internally designed deactivator of that nicotine meet in the middle, and they diffuse each other or counteract each other, and therefore you feel a relief. So that is a highly reinforcing cycle that takes place. And this person is undoubtedly has set up this very same process with respect to food. So when you're full, you are expecting to cram, and if you do not cram, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to crave the cram. So even though you eat into the pain, the system is ready for you to do it, and there is a comfort in essentially having all those digestive enzymes and anything else that has been released, close the loop on that process. Now, I don't know if it's digestive enzyme or not. I'm actually speculating that that's true. But I'm confident that the craving that people feel once they're full is an engineered condition phenomenon. That isn't my theory. That's something that's been discovered. Now, now what do we do about this? Well, you can know that you have to go through a counter conditioning process that is probably going to take a week to get through the worst of it, where you just have to white knuckle it and not do it. And people will jump up and down and say, yes, but what if I can't do it? It's like, well, then you're addicted to cigarettes for your whole life and you die of lung cancer. In other words, there are consequences to not breaking conditioning paradigms. Conditioning paradigms are, depending upon what substance we're talking about, they can be very difficult to break. And so processed food, for example, can be pretty difficult. It's not nearly as hard as cigarettes, by the way. It's not as potent as cigarettes. So anybody that craves that chocolate and is saying, oh, my God, I just craved the chocolate, I understand that you do have an addictive-like process, but it is not as intense as somebody getting off cigarettes. As someone who has watched thousands of people get off of various and sundry substances, I can tell you that getting off cigarettes is tougher. Now, that doesn't mean this is trivial. And in this case, we're not getting away from even processed foods. We're just getting away from a conditioning paradigm of cramming. Now, it's interesting. All of these eating type things and their problems associated with them, whether it be the neuroadaptation to super rich foods, and so we only like the taste of rich foods, or a conditioned cram process. White knuckling it is one way. There's also another technique that we rarely talk about here, but people know me as being. Many people know that I am the psychologist for True North Health Center in Northern California. And what True North Center is it's actually a place that specializes in water-only fasting. So if you haven't heard me talk about this and you just know this as a place where we discuss, personality and romance and love and evolutionary psychology, this is one of the most bizarre, fascinating, and important behavioral adaptations that you could imagine. So listen carefully while I describe the importance of this. This is water fasting is water fasting is in fact a behavioral adaptation. This is a human instinct, and it's not just a human instinct. It's throughout the animal kingdom. So when animals get ill, they fast. The reason for this is that they are better off not putting new food in their mouths. They're better off getting under a bush and hiding and essentially not eating. That's their best move when they're ill. It turns out that when you do this, there's a whole host of mechanisms that will optimize healing response. Immune function, all kinds of things. The organs basically don't have to metabolize foods, the eliminative organs, and the filtering mechanisms like the liver and kidneys, basically things get much easier. And so this is a spectacular opportunity for the body to get well and to give it its best chance to survive. And it turns out that you can also do it electively. So animals wouldn't do this selectively, not if they're not ill. But it turns out that human beings can use this selectively and actually improve their health over where they are by using this technique. So it is also the case that in addition to using water fasting, which is a completely and utterly natural adaptation, but we can use it electively, it can also be the case that it, of course, will do an awful lot of things along the purely digestive and taste preference domains. So as you would expect, if you put any sensory system under total deprivation, that system will recover its sensitivity faster than in any possible way. So if your eyes are overwhelmed with bright lights, if you completely shut off all access to light, even so you can't even see any light through your eyelids, it's going to turn out that the sensitivity to light will recover quicker than if you have yourself in a room if you just dial down the lights. So the same thing is true, in any sensory domain. So you will become more sensitive to sound if we completely have no sound in the background. And now your ears become very acutely sensitive to the slightest noise. Okay? So the same thing is true of taste. So if you are not enjoying the taste of whole natural foods and you've heard that it's a good idea for your health, then one of the smartest things that you could possibly do would be to water fast. So you might do it for a day, and it turns out that even in a day, 24 hours, you will increase your sensitivity to the taste of food. Now, you can imagine what will happen if you do that for several days. So it will turn out that people that thought that they could not stand food that wasn't laden with fat and salt are suddenly willing and eagerly eating foods that are whole natural out of the garden 5 or 6 days later after a water fast, because the taste buds have changed dramatically in the same way that your eyes can change dramatically in their sensitivity if you go into a dark room and then you go to a light room. So this is water fasting, and this is a spectacular potential that sits under the nose of modern medicine, and modern medicine barely knows about it. Now it's starting to get more traction. We published some significant works in the field, and others are extremely interested. Major academics throughout in the United States and around the world. So this is now finally getting out of the whack job arena and into the arena of serious consideration and scholarship, and it's superb. Now, why am I saying all this? Well, for one thing, our questioner here is struggling with a conditioned cram circuit. They're not struggling with the pleasure trap, but they're struggling with a nervous system that appears to be conditioned to cramming. The ultimate abstinence for this would be a water fast. And so I would recommend this person might go 2 or 3 days, maybe a couple days on their own. Don't eat anything. And let's see if we can resensitize those nerves to the point where when you eat an intermediate level of food, that feels, that we've quieted down the conditioning paradigm and essentially broken its predictive cycle. Now, that might not do it. But even 2 or 3 days might do it. And it might be easier for you to go 2 or 3 days on water over a long weekend than it would be for you to try to eat intermediately and stop. So that's one thing. The other reason, actually, is it turns out, fortuitous question, at True North Health Center, we are well known in this arena of the world. And Alan Goldhammer, my good friend who runs the place, is very reasonable and cost conscious, and so therefore it's not particularly expensive, and so something that is really good for you and not very expensive gets very popular, and you can't get into the place if you wanted to. Right now the waiting list is 3 or 4 months to get in. It's a great experience. Helps people turn their lives around. It helps them get out of the pleasure trap. It helps them move through a variety of health conditions, lose weight, reverse their diabetes, reverse their high blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera. However, sounds good. You don't hear me promoting it because there's no reason to promote it because you can't get in. It's good for you to know about it in case you want to go someday and plan in advance. But it turns out that we have a new center. We have a new place to go. And the new place to go is being opened by nobody other than your host, Nate G. Nate G, I'm now going to expose him. Nate G is actually Dr. Nathan Gershfeld, and he was a staff doctor at True North Health Center for several years where he learned this technique from the inside out. And we lost Nathan because he wanted to go back down to Southern California towards his roots. But now he is opening a new facility in, is it Yorba Linda? Is that where you are?
Yep.
In Yorba Linda in Orange County, and it's a small, elite, nice place where you get this very same type of service and very same type of process where people that are interested in having this experience for reasonable, very reasonable rates, just True North-like, where you get an exquisite place to slow down, take a water fast, have someone who really knows what they're doing to supervise the process. This is obviously a big ad for my friend Nate here, but the reason why I'm saying it is that this is a great opportunity for people to be able to do this if they are interested in this kind of an experience, and one that you don't have to wait 4 months to get in. So I've exposed you. I gave you an ad, and I'd say a lot more, and I will in the future because I think this is just a fabulous thing. I've been trying to talk you into this for a long time. I finally wore you down. And I'm really looking forward to this all coming together and you basically offering this for folks to have a great experience. All right.
Wow.
Sound good?
Thank you very much for the endorsement, Dr. Lisle, and for people who are going to be coming in. Dr. Lisle, you're actually going to come and speak at the center in July. So
I will. You bet. I wouldn't miss it for anything.